Hello, thank you for joining me today. I am going to attempt to summarize a set of positions I take through my project, the Betterment Project, in this video. This is something that's kind of been causing me trouble to adequately describe how all my different projects interrelate. So here we go in an attempt to do that. So I'm trying to summarize three things. The concept system, which I used to call the category system, which I have a lot of old videos on that are, I'm iffy on, but they're all right. What I might call a judgment system, which is something like a group of people who have a high level of skill and proficiency at judging that concepts are stable in a concept system. And I'll describe what all that means in a second. And then finally, a ranking system. And a ranking system is a method of discovering whether or not your community of judges is worth their salt, if you will. It's a criteria of elevating the ones who are skilled and giving ample room for those who are not to grow. I'll put it that way. All right, so what do I mean by a concept? What is a concept system, in other words? A concept is nothing more than a term in a definition. Granted, a term can be a simple sign, like a signpost. Something that has only one meaning is very simple. A word, or it can be something more like a symbol, which has many layers and much complexity. I just realized I haven't fully investigated what it means to include symbol into the idea of term, because that would open up an entire realm of other issues that I don't know if I know how to integrate. So maybe maybe I'll just go with signs for now and make it easier. But I think I will have to deal with symbol eventually. So yeah, it's going to be in there. I just don't have a good way of describing it right now. Okay, so you have a term and you have a definition. What is a definition? It is a network of other concepts, right? So that you have networks of concepts that define each other. And I wish I had made a diagram of this, but if you can imagine, let's say we take Wikipedia, only also include in that Wikipedia all the definitions of every single word, and so it's basically also an encyclopedia, a dictionary, but also some sort of description of how the language itself works. If you had those three things, which Wikipedia probably does have that actually now that I think about it. I don't know if they have a dictionary though. But if you had all three of those together, you would have something like a concept system, except you would have everything hyperlinked together. Every single word, the word the word, a, everything would have its own page and would be linked through. That would be an example of a single concept system, although then there are layers of worldviews that get added to that, and I'll go into that in a minute. So if hopefully you get the picture that there is, well, I'll go on to the illustration here. So let's say we have a complete and accurate, and I'll describe what that means soon, network of linked concepts. So our Wikipedia plus dictionary, with everything linked together, and then you remove all the words. But the code is still there. The hyperlink coding that the web browser uses is still there. Now, on the one hand, it looks like we've lost our data, right? Because we can't read it. We can't interact with it. But the interconnectivity of those concepts are still there. So in that sense, there's a sense in which the meaning structure itself, if not the terms that give us meaning, is still present. Hopefully that's a paradigm shift. It was for me, and it helped me grasp the way terms interact in a more systemic way. All right. So every concept then, this Wikipedia article that we have everything hyperlinked together, this network of concepts, every concept in there is attempting to reference something, right? I will call that reference an appearance, because we appear to see something, or we appear to see another person or a car, or we appear to see liberty in action being acted out, or we think we notice when we triangulate from several points that there is some phenomenon like, you know, the way light travels through, I can't remember the light slit experiment in detail, but we can notice a strange effect, even if we don't know what's going on, but then we can do other experiments and we can triangulate around, right? So those are all appearances. And I am the only thing I know for certain, this is kind of an epistemological or almost metaphysical claim, but it seems to me that we have to start from the assumption that the only thing I can really be certain of is that something is appearing to me. And then I have to interpret what that appearance is. Whether it's I'm thinking, that's an appearance. I could not be thinking, though. Something else could be happening that merely looks like thinking. I don't think that's the case, but I'm just saying. We have to start with appearances. This is not relative. This is not to be relativistic, but this is to recognize that we don't truly have, we're not gods. This is my humility principle, which you can listen to in some of my other videos. It's the idea that I could be wrong, because I'm not God and I can't confirm everything. What I do know is that something is appearing in front of me. I can be certain of that. I just can't be certain of what that appearance actually means, what the concept, the correct concept is to refer to that. So, okay. So our abilities, the concept of an ability, like using a hammer and nail, shooting a basketball, programming a program, those all refer to a skill that has so many things involved: your neurons, your neural pathways, your habits, your skills, your muscle coordination. When we have a concept like an ability, throwing a ball, that ability as a concept is twin to the thing it refers to. Pretty obvious, but let's just be certain that when we're talking about a concept system, we're not talking necessarily about the references themselves, the things being referred to, the things that we appear to be talking about. We are talking about using not participatory knowledge, but propositional knowledge. This is just a network of propositional claims. That's all the concept system is. But it is a tool to help us come to terms with each other and with our problems, to define them as rigorously as possible, but hopefully to not let that concept system blind us to grasping a larger understanding of the world. Because we have to have, there's several ways of knowing the world. We have to participate in the world. We have to, propositional knowledge helps us, but we also have to, well, I won't go into all that. So social theory is another concept. Anything that's a social theory, whether it's a person, my friend, whether it is this society or these two societies working together, or how societies could work together. Those are all referring to human interactions, or appear to be. And finally, pure concepts like abstractions, like Kant's a priori, pure a priori principles. Those might be simply referring to abstractions in our mind, things that we've seen patterns in the world, we've abstracted them out, and then we've kind of triangulated around to figure out what, and innovated a concept that helps us describe what's going on in the world in the most abstract way possible. That's one very low-level claim. It doesn't take much to claim that I believe this is an abstraction from the world. But it's a potential metaphysical reality as well, right? It might be that our pure concept is also referring to a metaphysical reality. So those are three ways of seeing the way a concept can refer to an appearance. And I'm making sure that we don't get the concept system confused with the reference around us. It's very important. Okay. And systemic emergence is another very important principle. The characteristics of complex and some complicated, and of course the difference between those, if you're not familiar, is something complicated has so many effects going on, it's very hard for us to model and predict. And it also tends to have the characteristic of being anti-fragile. So, for instance, a biome, the interconnected life in an area, and even on the entire globe. We've only gotten powerful enough to really mess that up recently, but it's been pretty anti-fragile. Chop one tree down, everything's fine. Chop almost all the trees down, we're heading for trouble, right? I hope we're in agreement with that. Complicated is like a computer. It's really complicated, but we can analyze it, we can predict it, and unfortunately it's fragile. If you drop it, it's not going to be okay. You drop me on my head, I might not be okay, but I might be okay. I might be able to recover from that. So I'm a little more anti-fragile than that. So the characteristics of complex networks to have properties that the parts lack. So my atoms can't talk to you. But when they are arranged in a specific way, with my mind, with whatever all is going on inside of me, my atoms can form a whole with the property of being able to talk to you. That's all the systemic emergence is talking about. But that's really important, right? It's really important not to get confused that when you drill down to the smallest part, you figured everything out. No, the way things interact as a system is incredibly important. And the properties of that system appear to emerge almost as if out of nothing. Obviously, we don't think it's out of nothing, but if we don't know how it works, we might as well be saying it's out of nothing, right? We just have to assume it's not out of nothing, that there's some way that this system works that makes sense that we can analyze. But we might never be able to do it. We might never fully be able to understand why the human brain works the way it does. That's possible. Maybe it's not likely, I don't know, but it's possible. So emergence is this quality of nature which only exists as emergent properties of simpler parts of nature. So you have all these simpler parts, they come together, and suddenly something emerges. So good example of this, simple example of this. This is actually complex, not complicated. No, complicated, not complex. I always get those mixed up. Anyway, but it's still emergent, right? If I have all these parts in my driveway, I'm not going to be able to jump on them and drive down the highway at 80 miles per hour. I have to have them all arranged in the correct way, and then suddenly all these strange parts that none have the ability to safely transport me down the highway at 60 miles per hour or whatever, suddenly they can do that. That's an example of emergent systemic emergence. But another is philosophy principles. So there's tons of examples of emergence, but I wanted to make this point because this was another paradigm shift for me. I was working on the Betterment Project and trying to figure out the central principle. How can I boil everything down to one principle? And I realized you can't do it. Not unless you want to call it something like the set of essential principles and define it as the set of essential principles that you need to define whatever system you're defining, whether it's logic, whether it's the Betterment Project itself, whatever. You have to have a lot of principles. Not a single part is going to get you what you want. You have to have all those principles working together in concert, right? Okay, hope that's clear. What makes a well-structured concept? Okay, so now we're getting into the criteria. We've talked about what a concept is. Now, what criteria can we use to judge that concept? Here are three concepts I think you have, three concepts you have to define a concept. So completeness. This means that every term needed to, what was the term I was going to use? Sorry. Sufficient. It's not the best term, but I'm going to go with sufficient because I can't think of a better one right now. Because again, you don't want to define circularly. I'm trying to avoid circular definition, but in the end, if you define everything down to a single principle, and you're saying this set of principles is about that, and then you say, and we know these set of principles not because we have arrived at a metaphysical truth, but that it is a reflection of reality, and we know the reality because we're using the system to define reality, you see where we're going. That's a circular definition as well. It's a whole concept system is circular. But that's what we got. That's what we got. We can't get to an absolute grounded part of reality except for the fact that we appear to have appearances. And then we have to judge whether the concepts that we have to judge those appearances seem to be accurate enough or not. So is it complete? Do you have all the parts you need present? Is it accurate? Do you have those parts, those terms, arranged correctly so that it is sufficient enough to describe the appearance you've had? And then alignment is a larger idea. This is the idea that a whole category or concept system, it's almost an issue of, it's almost personal. It's almost about how well individuals respond to the network of concepts. How well can they use them? How fluent can they be with those terms? So you choose terms, ways of representing that are more capable for a group to understand what you're saying very easily and very quickly. So that's part of the goal of the concept system, is to build a network of concepts that is not only as rational as possible, but is as communicatable as possible, is easy as possible for other people to pick up. And to that end, I mean, I'd like to see, once a concept system is made, I would love to see apps that allow you to interact with those concepts in kind of a 3D game way, kind of gamify the interaction. You know, you can imagine a game where you're using building blocks, and you're trying to make sure all the building blocks are stable, that they don't just fall down. Maybe they're on a raft or on a series of boats, or they're blocks that are bobbing up and down in the water, and you're trying to build upwards to do something, and you want to make sure that they all are balanced. And if you're not balancing your concepts correctly, it falls apart. That would be a way of gamifying the interaction with the concept system in a way that kind of playfully allows you to at least learn from it. Maybe not. You'd probably have to have a different game than that to actually improve the concept system. But anyway, so alignment, defining concepts in a way that is structurally aware of cross-discipline integration and is across layers of abstraction. I might also add not only cross-discipline, like, you know, different areas of science, but different belief systems. You know, the Buddhists, the atheists, the Christians, the Muslims. Can we make a category system, concept system, sorry, that is termed, all the terms are chosen in such a way that it maximizes their ability to interact with the system and learn from it. Generally aligned structures is more to the point of what alignment is trying to do. So for maximal, minimal to optimal, plus mean perhaps, common convergence of divergent disciplines and worldviews, largely through analogical metaphorical structures. Okay, what does all that mean? Minimal, I'm talking about the minimal set of descriptors or concepts to describe something to somebody. Let's say you're not an expert, you're a layman, but you want to be educated. What is the minimal set of concepts you need in a network to describe what you're talking about? That's what a minimal concept system would be. Optimal, however, is what you need for expertise. And it can be described as having a large nested network of minimal concepts. In other words, when you have an optimal grasp of something, you could describe it as having a minimal grasp of all the subparts of that expertise, which in turn has another minimal grasp. You can talk about it, of course, as being optimal means I know all the knowledge, right? And there's nothing minimal about that because you know it all. But if it's organized in a way that maximizes learning, then you can break everything down into a minimal form, right? Even though you have to then go down and break it down more. But that way your levels of expertise are nested, and you can choose how deep you go. That's a way to make it more useful to learn these ideas. But back to the definition, plus meme perhaps. Memes would be, I think that would be the symbols, honestly, that I mentioned earlier. So you would have an idea of how can we memify this minimal concept? And so there would be artistry involved in that, and there would be, it would have to be more cultural sensitive in some ways. But I think we could do it. I think we could aim at humanity as in general as our goal and create memes of almost any minimal concept. And so if you could see a meme, which would almost be an embodiment, a form of participatory knowledge, or at least being a perspectival. Sorry, I don't have my P's right, my Forver-Reiki knowledge P's correctly. Sorry. So anyway, but it's metaphorical, right? The meme level would be metaphorical. The whole aligned structure, in order to bridge the gap between different disciplines, different worldviews, there has to be a level of metaphor going on. It doesn't have to be completely and utterly metaphorical, but it has to be metaphorical enough that we can kind of abstract from what we mean and find common language to do that. And I think in order to do that, we're going to have to bring in psychology, we're going to have to bring in society, social theory, we're going to have to bring in some kind of metaphorical theory of archetypes and that kind of thing. We bring all those and we weld them together into a network of concepts that are the general aligned structure that unifies, that brings together all these different theories, something like that. There's probably more to it than that, but anyway, that's my current theory. What makes a stable concept? Okay, another criteria. So you have a concept system, but you want to know that the concepts are not just hogwash, right? You want to know that they're good, that they've been that experts in the fields have been able to judge them accurate to reality, to the appearances that they've seen, something like that. I'm using the term stable to define that. And the way I mean stable is that the concepts within that concept system are conceptually consistent. That means they're not self-contradictory. Or if they do self-contradict, they do so in an internally logical way. So an example would be me, as a 42-year-old man. If I went through and defined myself as I am in this state, but then I define myself also as who I was at 5-year-old, those seem to contradict, right? Are you 5'12", or are you whatever I was, 32 inches? Don't know. Well, don't know. I don't know. I was thinking I don't know how tall I was at that age. Anyway, but if you describe the way, again, appearance, of how we appear to grow and appear to age and appear to be the same person over time, because there's kind of this consistency between events, between growth over time. It's a gestalt, right? You can't pick it apart by. I'm sorry, I'm getting off topic. I have a big issue with people forgetting to look at the large picture and only looking at the propositional statements. If you're only looking at the propositional statements, you can't get the big picture. So if you're propositionally describing people, you can't actually describe how they age, because you have to. It's almost like pixels or moments in time. Whereas if you get the impression that the right brain, according to Ian McGilchrist, is capable of, then you get the gestalt of the person of the whole. Sorry, I'm off topic here. So you have to be consistent with your description over time. If it's inconsistent, you have to have a reason why, a description of why. Apparently consistent means consistent with our observations. I sometimes call these internally consistent and externally consistent. Means the concepts are consistent within the concept network that describes this concept system that a single term defines, single concept can define, because it's all nested, right? Like I can define my knowledge, and that defines everything I know, right? And you can define your knowledge, and you can define human knowledge, and then you have all these nests of not human knowledge, and then you can go deeper. Anyway, so apparently consistent is about the thing that the concept appears to be referring to. It's consistent with the observations of reality, right? And then livable is my third criteria. The first two criteria you could talk about scientifically, right? Because you would be talking about the appearance of your scientific experiment is trying to observe, and you could talk about the concepts that are trying to be a definition, a propositional definition of what you think is happening scientifically. What science tends to try to do, though, is exclude the view from the individual in favor of the view from anyone, general view. But that can exclude very important data, like what it is like to be the one who science harms. If a scientist is using harm in a bad way, for instance, or if a bad theory causes harm because we don't have I'm off the rails a little bit. I'm sorry. I'm well aware that I'm on the road to making statements about science that I have no time or willingness to defend right now. So let me just back up. Livability is about the fact that you may want to live or you may not. You may want to eat vanilla ice cream or potatoes. You may want to. You may be inspired to live a good life by God, or you may be inspired to live a life by. I'm sorry, I don't understand atheism, but by your wish that everyone. I don't understand atheism. I'm sorry, I can't describe it. Whatever you atheists believe, that would be your livability. Okay, moving right along. Sorry. Okay, and I had a technical difficulty. Let's see here if I can find. Oh my gosh, why is this happening? This is what I want. Okay. Third time going through this, so hopefully I know it pretty well. Let's start. So I finished my slides. What I'm going to do now is show you an outline, a visual representation of the concept system, the judgment network, and the ranker network. So those are the three things. The concepts are the concepts, the judgment is the criteria of judgment, and the rankers are the people who use the criteria of judgment to judge the concept system. Okay, sufficiently confusing? Good. All right. We're going to start with, so imagine there's an arrow going from this white box that says starter seeds to this concept system box, because I forgot to put it in, and I'm done editing this for now. So we're going to start with these starter seeds. And these are ideas that I think are necessary for ensuring that a concept system gets off the ground, gets up and running. Actually, I should say, I guess I call these three criteria, I call a betterment project. So to get a betterment project off the ground, you're going to have these starter seeds. So this is some basic set of concepts, but they are not yet judged concepts because you're just starting, right? So then you need some set, and another arrow, another box should be a community, some community of people that you trust. So add a white box that says community of people that you trust. But you also start with a minimal set of judgment principles. So this is what I was talking about earlier with complete and accurate, aligned, as well as your principles of internal consistency, external consistency, which were also, I should have just stuck with internal and external because I can't remember the other ones. Conceptual consistency and apparent consistency, right? External appearances. And livability. So those are kind of our minimal set. And I say minimal because it could be wrong. It's just a seed, and we'll see what it grows into. It can be corrected. So you start with this minimal set, and it hopefully grows into something bigger. A minimal set of cultural stabilized principles is something like, how do we treat each other? If we mess up, how do we repent and make things good again? The culture, how do we define the culture? So I'm defining that by civility, and that too can be added to, and it can be modified for different communities, because you can have different communities using the same concept system, but judging things differently. And I'll go into that more as we move forward. So we have these starter seeds, and I'll go into what these yellow boxes are later, that begin to create a stable judgment system in order to create, or that create a stable judgment system in order to create a stable concept system. So when you have the concept, when you have the community, when you have the minimal sets principles, you begin to get to here. And once you get to the stable concept system, which requires the updating of the stable judgment network, and it is included in. So this is a part of it. Your concept system, your minimal starter seeds, those are all concepts within your concept system, because everything is trying to be a propositional statement within the stable concept system. So then you have these judgers, right, that are using the judgment criteria. I call rankers, for reasons I'll get to soon. So rankers can do two things. They can contribute concepts. This is kind of out of order. They should be contribute concepts, which are either new or revised or critiques. That's what they are contributing, or they can vote. But let's go to these contributions first. Interestingly enough, all contributions are categories, are concepts, I mean. So it's a new category. If it's a critique, it's a new category if you're revising critique. But you're revising a critique, you say. Well, that's because there is an ambition in the project that I have, and maybe this needs to be changed, of making sure no concept is ever deleted. Maybe deleted if it never gets a good vote, or maybe it will be kind of defragmented or collapsed into other. So like if you're contributing a concept that is already pretty much present, then that can be collapsed in. Oh, and I forgot that one. Okay, I'll add it later. I'll try to put the pin in that one. All right. Sorry. So, new or revised critiques. Voting. When you vote, you are voting either on a concept or on a critique. You are not voting a concept down. You are voting a critique up. Why? Because I don't want this to be a system in which you can downvote something without a reason. You have to be willing to either find a critique you agree with or contribute one you agree with and vote on that instead. That puts you into a cycle of rebuttals that is par for the course for the system. Because what we are really trying to get to is not to say who agrees with what, but to find a way of resolving our concepts. And the way you resolve concepts is by, or one technique, let's say, and there should be many, is to say that we are not after, in this concept system, we are not after what is actually true of reality, but what can be said about the beliefs of reality. So in other words, when Muslims and Christians and atheists and whoever else can agree that Christians, this set of Christians believes this concept, and that set of atheists believe that concept, and that set of Buddhists believe that concept, etc., those concepts are resolved. When you have a high, I would like to set it at 98%. 98% agreement, 98% upvoting of the central concept, and with the critiques having resulted in downvotes. Wow, there's a technical problem there I just saw. I'll work on that. That'll be for another video. But let's pretend I have it figured out, and we'll say we figured out how to resolve these things. It's a consensus, right, of people saying, yes, you believe it. I don't necessarily believe it. I don't think it's necessarily true of reality, but I agree that in this reality, you appear to believe that. That creates stability. Stability is, that criteria I was talking about. But now you have a stable concept. It's not just a word. It's not just your judgment principle. It is a description of a consistency within that stable concept system. But you also get commonly emerged criteria. So that's new judgment systems. So you could create a concept that is a new judgment criteria, right? And if that gets upvoted enough, then it's a part of the system. It's part of the stable judgment network, which in turn is part of the stable concept system. All right. Now let's talk about this voting thing, though. I am suggesting that in such a system, we don't want everyone to have the same voting power, because we want there to be experts, and we want to reward those experts, and we want to empower them to do the job, to overturn others' votes who are incorrect, right? To have that kind of power. So this is how I'm suggesting doing it, which is to have a rank for different voters. So let's say you start and you're an F rank, not because you're a failure, but because you just started. And you're just starting. So let's say your voting power is 0.001, very low. I'll say 0.01. It's going to work out better that way. Sorry. How do you rank up? So I'm suggesting these 4 criteria, and there's one I forgot, which I'll start with the one I forgot. I think there should be a certain amount of ranking up when you help clean up a category system, when there's the same concepts are set in there a million times, but you defrag them, mint them all together. I think you get, even if it's a downvoted concept that nobody likes, you're cleaning up the system, and that contributes to the overall system. So that allows you to rank up. And I'll have to adjust my percentages according to that. But for now, we'll just forget about that, and we'll go with what we have here on the board. So your civility ratio is kind of different, separate from these other 3. It's simply how well are you at being civil, to keeping the culture heading towards resolution and not towards division. We want to resolve these concepts so that we are in agreement and can solve our problems collectively, right? So this is a mechanism not simply of propositional statements, but of reaching out to people through these conceptual statements into their lives, right? Into helping them resolve problems in their own life. Because this concept network could have any kind of concept, right? It could be about how to be a better mother, how to be a better father, how to be better at your job, so that it could be used for upgrading all areas of life, I would like to suggest. Copyright is an issue, I suppose, and hopefully that can be resolved in time. If this project becomes huge enough and everybody's like, okay, you just can't. Well, I think there's a problem with constant copyright anyway. I think it needs to be shifted from a monetary thing to a more of a respect level thing. Your status in society is judged not by your wealth, but by your status. But that is a completely different topic. By your cultural, rank. But I don't want to use rank there. But okay, I wasn't going to talk about this anyway. Civility ratio. Let's say 3 out of every 5 actions you take in this Betterment project that you're interacting with, which is, again, the name of these 3 criteria: the concept system, the ranking system, and the judgment system. Sorry to reiterate, but I just always feel the need to reiterate. So 3 out of 5 actions are civil. And if you've messed up, you've apologized, and that's ranked you back up, that kind of thing. That affects 20% of your ranked voting. And by percent, I don't simply mean those are connected, so that if you're only being civil, well, you wouldn't be doing anything, right? And if you're only voting, which voting kind of plays into this agreement ratio, and I'll explain that in a second. If you're only voting, you can never actually rank up. You have to also be playing, 20% of your actions have to be voting. 20% of your actions are voting. 20% of your actions are contributing, and a third of your actions are contributing, a third of your actions are resolution, a third of your actions are voting, something like that. But it's not just voting. I'll get to that. Everybody take a deep breath over the redhead who talks too fast and stumbles all the time over his own concepts. Okay. Contribution ratio is how much you're contributing, how many concepts you're contributing. Now it's not 1 out of 3 contributions. It's 1 out of every 3 actions must be a contribution. It has to be done so civilly 3 out of 5 times. That your contribution ratio affects 20% of your rank. The resolution ratio is, have you been helping resolve issues? So I'm really gearing this whole system towards, are you willing to help resolve things somehow? Are you in there somehow resolving issues? And who knows, maybe this whole defragment idea is a part of resolution. Maybe that's where that'll stick in. And that way a person who is actually poor at innovating resolution is still able to rank up. I don't know. That's just an idea. Agreement ratio means that you are voting with a high population, with the rest of your judgment network, because we can have a judgment network that uses a different criteria or is agreeing to a different worldview. Well, maybe not that. Not that. Scratch that last one. Certainly you can have a community in this network that all agree on the same, let's call them metaphysical claims, which I'm so crazy that I would claim hard atheism is a metaphysical claim. That can't be proved. But anyway, we won't go into that topic right now. Your agreement ratio then is how well are you fitting in with the people who are using a criteria of judgment consistently and are doing so civilly. So it is not simply how many times you voted, it's how many times you voted with your community. That might sound sketchy, because it might sound like, oh, you just vote with that community, right? And then yay, groupthink. But, I mean, I'm hoping, I don't know how to judge whether someone is voting from a place of authenticity or whether they're voting to rank up. But I'm hoping that the resolution ratio makes it pointless to agree just because everybody else is agreeing. Because you still won't rank up much if you're just agreeing with everybody else. You have to be working towards contributing new concepts and towards resolution. So that's why these are all connected, right? You can't just agree. Every third action has to be something else. Only one action can be one of these. Okay. To move on. So 40%, I've set it really high. But that's how you build your rank. And so I've mentioned that you start off, say, level F. Doesn't have to be a level F. Maybe it's level 4 or 6 or whatever. But let's say it's level F for now. 0.01 is your voting power. Let's say you level up to level D. Well, now your ranking power your voting power is 0.1. So you have 10 times the power of a level F. Now you go to C. Now your ranking level, or your voting power is 1. So for every concept you vote on to say it is being resolved from the critiques of it. So the critiques are like weights, right? And you can have critiques of their critiques, which are rebuttals, right? And if the rebuttal satisfies the critique, then the critique has no weight, right? It's kind of like a counterbalance. Anyway, sorry, I just got pictures of balloons and weights trying to balance each other. Sorry. So you have, if you're the C ranker, you have a power of 1. But that's not all, right? You can go to B level, and suddenly you have 10. You have a rank of your vote has the power of 10 to every C, and the power of 100 to every D, and the power of 1,000 to every F. But that's not all. You get to A, and suddenly your votes are worth 100. It's all according to competence, according to the judgment structures, right? We're saying you can build a stable structure, a stable judgment network, off of a bunch of your buddies that say, I don't agree with your starter seeds. We're going to start our own criteria, and you can go off to the races with it. But the interesting thing is that, oh man, I got to think about this more. There's got to be a connection, a cross-cultural, cross-judgment connection, because if they're just off in their own bubble, that doesn't help anybody, right? And if you're off in your bubble. So there has to be this interconnection. So I would say, I'll think about that more. That's unfortunate. That's a huge bug in the system I'm going to have to work out. Okay. Note that I will have to make a follow-up to this video to resolve this issue. If you don't see the issue, that's okay. I'll define it later in the video. So there are supposed to be these different levels, and I would suggest perhaps that there's an algorithmic difficulty so that it is not just cumulative, but it becomes the actual, even though I've talked about the percentages and I've talked about these ratios, maybe there's also a degree of contribution such that from F to B, F to D is pretty easy, D to C gets a little bit harder, C to B is pretty hard, and C and B to A is very hard, something like that. I'm probably going to need to do that. Okay. That pretty much summarizes everything. I'll have to resolve the issues I've talked about, but we've talked about what you start with, these 2 white boxes plus a couple of ones, your community of people you trust. We've talked about the stable judgment network that is a part of your stable concept system, which can evolve new judgment networks, which is all voted on and developed by your judgment network, which individuals in your judgment network rank up according to the competence they've shown by this criteria, which is there should be an arrow coming over here as well to these, because you can upgrade these. I'm not sure about that though. I mean, I'll have to map out how it works. I really have to do some big work on what it looks like for these different communities of rankers who have different criteria of judgment, how they interact, because that's got to be handled very well as well. It's funny that I've discovered this, but I've had to reshoot this video 3 times, and I've just now seen the problem clearly. So hey, good job recording it 3 times and discovering a new problem. All right, I believe that's everything. As long as, yes, it actually recorded this time. Good. Thank you for watching my video, and I'll see you next time.